So the European Union is making headlines with its plan to invest an eye-watering $800 billion into defense. Let's take a moment to think about why this is happening now. Well, first, there's the very real threat of Russian aggression. Since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Russia has demonstrated just how willing it is to test Europe's resolve, both militarily and strategically. But this isn't a short-term reaction to a crisis. According to NATO intelligence, Russia's military spending has surged, with 40% of its federal budget funneling into its armed forces, effectively operating in full war mode. It's a sobering thought, and it pushes Europe to reimagine how it safeguards its borders and its people. Now, this $800 billion defense initiative is structured around strategic programs like Readiness 2030 and SAFE. What are these? First, Readiness 2030 aims to ensure Europe has a robust and sufficient defense posture by that year. Think of it as a deadline to streamline military capabilities, everything from air and missile defenses to cyber warfare systems. SAFE, on the other hand, stands for Security Action for Europe and is focused on pooling resources for joint procurement. Essentially, it's a way to unify spending so that EU nations can purchase compatible and cost-effective equipment from European suppliers. These initiatives also come with financial incentives like $150 billion in defense-specific loans to encourage joint efforts. The idea here isn't just about building stronger defenses for individual countries. It's about creating a cohesive and integrated European military force that can respond to threats collectively. And then we have specific examples of how this plays out on the ground. Poland and the Baltic states, countries that have highly charged histories with Russia, are leading the way in boosting defense budgets. Poland, for instance, has gone well beyond NATO's recommended 2% of GDP on defense, pushing to secure its borders and signal strength. The same is true for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. These countries are spending big, not because they're looking for conflict, but because they understand their geographic and geopolitical vulnerabilities better than anyone. They're essentially the front line of NATO's eastern defenses, and they're making sure that their military readiness matches the reality of living next to an increasingly assertive neighbor like Russia. These developments reflect a broader shift, not just in spending, but in how Europe is thinking about its role in global security. It's not about wanting war, but about preparing for the absolute worst. This push for defense autonomy brings us to a crossroads in Europe's relationships with long-standing allies. The exclusion of US, UK, and Turkish companies from key EU defense initiatives isn't arbitrary. It reflects a deeper strategy to bolster Europe's own industrial and technological base. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission president, has made it clear Europe must buy more European. And this goes beyond procurement. It's about creating a defense ecosystem that can stand independently. Brussels has introduced new rules. At least 65% of components eligible for funding must originate within the EU, Norway, or Ukraine. This ensures that resources stay local, fostering innovation while reducing dependency. But let's not sugarcoat it. This pivot presents challenges, especially for NATO. Historically, NATO leveraged transatlantic collaborations to pool military resources. Think back to the Cold War. The U.S. was Europe's primary security guarantor, especially when it came to counterbalancing Soviet influence. However, with shifting U.S. strategic priorities, focusing more on Asia and less on Europe, NATO's cohesion feels, well, complicated. Figures like Andrius Kubilius, the EU's first defense commissioner, have openly questioned the wisdom of over-relying on American military prowess while acknowledging the need for Europe to step up. There's a tension here, balancing unity within NATO while forging greater independence. And of course, these moves lead to diplomatic ripples. The UK and Turkey, both NATO members, now find themselves locked out of pivotal EU defense contracts unless they meet stringent new agreements. The UK, for example, shares deeply integrated defense manufacturing ties with the EU, yet remains outside the SAFE program, a striking contrast to the status quo of past decades. These exclusions have implications not just militarily, but diplomatically, straining alliances that took years to nurture. Now, figures like President Ursula von der Leyen and Callas, Europe's top diplomats, are steering this discourse with unprecedented urgency. It's not about breaking ties, but recalibrating them. President Ursula von der Leyen wants to make Ukraine a steel porcupine, one that Russia cannot swallow. And it's clear. Play this clip.
What Putin is saying there about reeling back equipment and training for Europe, and also taking what we've heard from the British Prime Minister this morning, determined to continue the support for the Ukraine. 2 weeks ago, at the same summit in London, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said we need to turn Ukraine into a steel porcupine, something that Russia can't swallow. That's the determination we're hearing from European ambassadors and leaders, that they want to continue to strengthen Ukraine's military position on the battlefield today and going forward. And that's at a complete variance with where President Putin is positioning himself at the moment. So it's going to be...
Let's zoom into a critical component of Europe's defense transformation: the push to source at least 65% of its defense supplies from within Europe. At first glance, it seems straightforward. Prioritize local suppliers, bolster the European industrial base. But if we unpack this, the nuances are fascinating. Ukraine's partnership in this effort is worth spotlighting. Since 2022, it's ramped up arms production from nearly non-existent to billions of euros annually. This rapid mobilization is no small feat. It's a clear demonstration of what's possible when resources, strategic intent, and urgency converge. For other EU nations, there's a lesson here, not just in scaling production, but in embracing a mindset of resilience and innovation. And isn't that what defense capability is fundamentally about? However, critics argue, and they're not entirely wrong, that Europe's defense procurement process is plagued by inefficiencies. Did you know the region operates over a dozen types of battle tanks compared to just one standard model in the United States? This fragmentation creates operational roadblocks and inflates production costs. Harmonization, then, isn't just an ideal, it's a necessity. And this is where the EU's push for integration comes into sharper focus. By pooling resources and leveraging models like Ukraine's adaptability, Europe can accelerate its defense readiness. Joint procurement initiatives under SAFE are a significant step in this direction. They allow multiple nations to invest collectively, creating economies of scale and reducing costs. And crucially, they align priorities across member states. Directly or indirectly, these steps inch Europe closer to a cohesive military-industrial complex, one that's less about reliance and more about capability. As we tie this together, here's the takeaway. Europe's defense strategy is not just a financial plan or a response to geopolitical shifts. It's a declaration that European security will no longer hinge entirely on external pillars. Whether you see this as necessary or overdue, it's a bold evolution in how the continent intends to protect its future. That wraps up today's episode of The Real 411. I want to personally thank each and every one of you for tuning in and for your continued support. It means more than you know. If you found value in today's discussion, please drop a comment. Follow us on all social media platforms and let us know what topics you'd like to see us cover next. Be sure to sign up for our email newsletter so you never miss an update or exclusive insight. And if you believe in independent media that digs deeper and dares to tell the truth, please consider following The Real 411 on Substack and Fanbase. We offer both free and paid subscriptions, and your support helps us continue producing content that informs, empowers, and sparks real conversation. Thanks again for being part of this journey. Because remember, the story is never just the headline. Until next time, stay informed, stay bold, and stay real.